Greetings. This brief presentation is part of a series in celebration of the 250th anniversary of the birth of America. Now, this is extremely important because many of the crises which our nation now finds itself immured are due in large measure to the profound ignorance of the history surrounding the creation of our republic and our independence from the British Empire. Far too many Americans have no idea of the principles on which the nation was founded. Many are unaware even of the date of the Declaration of Independence or what it signifies beyond the three B's: baseball, barbecue, and beer. Many think the occasion should not be celebrated at all, but denounce because they see America from the beginning simply as a country of enslavers and enslaved people. Many propose to extol the occasion in the wrong way. They see America since its inception as a campaign to become a glorified version of the British Empire. America first, bigger, better, brutaler, stronger, richer, and perhaps even whiter. These extremes have nothing to do with the true purpose and intent of the founding of our republic. History, historia in Greek, literally means investigation, the search for the truth. Understanding where we come from is crucial to understanding who we are or who we should be today. So today, we will look at who's in the boat. Emanuel Lewitz's beautiful painting is an excellent metaphorical image of the diverse forces that united throughout the colonies to fight for and to win the revolution. Almost everyone knows this famous painting. It depicts General George Washington crossing the Delaware on Christmas night, December 25th, 1776, to launch a surprise attack against the Hessian troops who were stationed across the river at Trenton. This is undoubtedly one of the most important dates in the creation of the United States. During the period, the previous 5 months, the American patriots had lost nearly every battle. They had been driven from Long Island to northern Manhattan, then to Westchester, across the Hudson River to Fort Lee, New Jersey, then forced to retreat across New Jersey and finally across the Delaware River, which you see here on the map, into Pennsylvania. The Army had lost nearly half its strength, going from a high point of 24,000 troops in August of 1776 to December 1776, where there were diverse commands directly under Washington's command, there remained only 2,400 able-bodied troops that could be mustered for the Trenton battle. The bold initiative by Washington at that point to cross the Delaware led to a decisive victory by the American patriots and turned the tide of the war. This painting is by the German-born Emanuel Leutze and was completed in Germany in 1850 during a period of revolutionary Republican upsurges in Europe. The painting came to the United States in 1851. It was purchased and displayed throughout the United States, and it was used during the Civil War to raise money for the Union cause, for the U.S. Sanitary Commission, and for the anti-slavery movement. It was later donated to the Metropolitan Museum, and it hangs now in the American wing. If you've only seen reproductions of this painting, you will be surprised. It is colossal. It measures 12 by 21 feet, and here you see it hanging in the Met. Now, there have been many attacks against the painting for the so-called inaccuracies depicting that Christmas evening. It said, well, it's the wrong type of boat, it's the wrong people in the boat, the river didn't look like that, et cetera, et cetera. None of these criticisms are to the point. The picture captures perfectly the spirit and the truth of that historical moment. But before we discuss more on the painting, I want to mention a few things in the history of our republic which are unique and which the painting itself does, in fact, beautifully depict. The US is the longest continuous federal constitutional republic in the world, albeit with flaws, notably the battle to eradicate slavery, which was not won at the time of our revolution, despite the vehement opposition to slavery by several of the founders, including Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, Samuel Adams, John Jay, Gouverneur Morris, and Thomas Paine. The lines from the preamble of our Constitution: we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, make clear that our government is not a finished product, but it depends on the citizens in a continuous process of changing and hopefully improving the nation. 2, the United States was founded by a global conspiracy that spans over a millennium in an attempt to establish a form of sovereign nation state based on the principle of natural law, the general welfare, the common good of all mankind, and which much of the world participated. Here you see the Declaration of Independence, which states in its onset, the history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. And to prove this, let facts be committed to a candid world. In other words, the signers were addressing themselves to the entire world, their contemporaries as well as posterity. That would mean us today. At the time, throughout the American colonies and around the world, people rose to the occasion. Support of foreign nations and individuals were crucial to the victory in the United States. This included active support from France, Spain, the Netherlands, Russia, Morocco, which, by the way, has the longest standing friendship treaty with the United States dating back to 1777. Venezuela, Haiti, a significant contingent of over 500 free men of color, known as the Chasseurs Volontaires de Saint-Domingue, present-day Haiti, fought alongside American and French forces during the siege of Savannah in 1779. Several participants from that unit later fought under Toussaint Louverture in the struggle for Haitian independence. Also, there was critical participation from the networks created by Gottfried Leibniz in England, Scotland, Germany, Ireland, Wales, and other locations. Third, the American Revolution is unique in that people of every background, ethnic origin, religion, and social status participated. The rich, the poor, Black, white, free, and enslaved, men and women, Native Americans, and those of European, Ibero-American, and African origin. So as we begin our investigation, Some immediate questions come to mind. Why did such a diverse group of people unify to create a revolution? What was the purpose for which they agreed to give their life, their liberty, and their sacred honor? Well, clearly it was not, at least for the majority of people, any pragmatic reason. Everyone had different ideas of the notion of liberty, but they were all united by a higher principle, not by their present circumstances, but by a noble idea, the struggle to create a society, a republic based on the conception we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. On June 15th, 1775, George Washington was appointed by the Second Continental Congress to head the Continental Army. This is just weeks after the battles of Lexington and Concord, and 2 days before the Battle of Bunker Hill. And here you see Washington arriving in Cambridge Commons on July 2nd, 1775, to find a disparate, undisciplined, motley collection of troops. This is a brief description of what Washington encountered and how he dealt with it. There he found savage-looking Western backcountry regiments but ace riflemen who were met with wealthy and very well-groomed Baltimore networks of the powerful planters class of Baltimore, Maryland. And they were, together with Colonel Glover's Marblehead, Massachusetts regiment. The latter regiment, it included many Black Americans and Native Americans who were fishermen and whalers. They were positioned in their units as they had been at sea. They were regarded for their intellect, their courage, and their cooperation with their crewmates in dangerous situations. They were not judged by wealth or social class or the color of their skin. David Hackett Fisher, in his excellent book entitled Washington's Crossing, recounts the following incident. It happened in Cambridge when a regiment of Virginia riflemen in white linen frocks, ruffled and fringed, met Glover's Marblehead regiment in round jackets and fishermen's trousers. There were mutual shouts of derision, and then something worse. Many of the Virginians were slave owners, and some of the Marblehead men were former African slaves. Insults gave way to blows, and blows to a fierce struggle with biting and gouging. One spectator wrote that in less than 5 minutes, you had 1,000 combatants at war on the field. Americans from one region were fighting Americans from another part of the country on a larger scale than the battles at Lexington and Concord. Washington acted quickly. A soldier from the Massachusetts regiment named Israel Trask watched him go about it. As the fighting spread throughout the camp, Washington appeared with his colored servant. Both were on horseback. Together, the general and William Lee rode straight into the middle of the riot. Trask watched Washington with awe as he, with, quote, the spring of a deer, leapt from his saddle, threw the reins of his bridle into the hands of his servant, and rushed into the thickest of the melee. With an iron grip, he seized 2 tall, brawny, athletic, savage-looking riflemen by the throat, keeping them at arm's length, alternatively shaking and talking to them. Talking was probably not exactly the right word. The rioters turned. The fighting stopped. In amazement, they watched Washington in action, And then they fled at top of their speeds in all directions. The trouble ended without courts, irons, or whips that were the more terrible than death to a proud back settler. In a few minutes, Washington and Lee had restored order to the army. Trask remarked that, quote, hostile feelings between two of the best regiments were extinguished by one man. Well, I guess that serves to demonstrate one of LaRouche's favorite adages. To get an idea across, you have to first get their attention. This is a picture by the great American artist John Trumbull of Washington and William Lee, Washington's trusted manservant, and according to all contemporary accounts, was the only one who could keep up with Washington, who was renowned for his writing skills. Lee was the only person that was able to do that. Born a slave, Lee was freed and granted an annual annuity by Washington in his will. And he was one of the first people that the Marquis de Lafayette, when he returned to the United States 50 years after the American Revolution in 1825, to tour the nation and also to campaign for the election of John Quincy Adams to the presidency. Now let's take a closer look at who's in the boat. You see there that Washington's small boat is crowded with 12 or perhaps 13 individuals that represent precisely the type of mixture you would have found in the Continental Army. Let's take a closer look. There you have the center frame of the picture. You have George Washington dressed in the Continental uniform of buff and blue. Note he has on one side a telescope to see ahead, and on the other side he carries a saber to prosecute the war. Next to Washington is President, at that time, Lieutenant James Monroe, the fifth president of the United States, holding a flag straight against the storm. Monroe led a unit of Virginia infantry in the Battle of Trenton, and he was seriously injured, actually one of the few people seriously injured in that battle when he was hit by a musket ball. And parenthetically, his life was saved by a Dr. Riker, who was recruited just the night before that battle as a volunteer. Next to Monroe, you see Smallwood's representative of Smallwood Silk Stocking Maryland Regiment, and you see there the white linen frocks ruffled and fringed that we had spoken about before. And in front of him, you have a prosperous Baltimore merchant identified with his boat coat and oil hat. Now we'll move on to the front, the bow of the boat. And there at the very front, you see a Western backcountry rifleman with a hunting shirt and deerskin leggings. Immediately to the right of him is a Scottish American identifiable by his Balmoral tartan hat. And next to him on the other side of the boat, you see a Black American Marblehead fisherman with his typical short blue tarpaulin jacket. Now, the skilled Marblehead unit had successfully saved Washington's army from certain destruction by rowing them across the river after the Battle of Long Island, and once again, in this situation, across the Delaware. The substantial presence of Black Americans in Colonel John Glover's unit and other New England towns which had Black Americans enslaved and free as an active part of their militia units for years. This was a major impetus in getting Washington to accept enlistments of African American soldiers. By the end of the war, Black Americans were actively recruited, and several even rose to the rank of colonel in New England. At the Siege of Yorktown in 1781, Baron Closen, a German officer fighting in the French Royal Regiment, estimated that about 1/4 of the American army to be Black men. And here we have the central and rear part of the boat. You'll see there in the red flowing robes near the front, there's an androgynous figure, possibly a woman. Many women join the military, sometimes disguised as men to join their husbands, and sometimes they were simply patriots who wanted to fight. Of note in this category is a woman by the name of Margaret Corbett, who is from Kingston section of the Bronx, who was one of the first women to enlist and fought and to receive actually a military pension for her service. Next to the woman in the red, you will see a soldier, or immediately behind her, a soldier who is in full dress uniform, blue coat, facing probably from Hazlitt's Delaware regiment. And we'll just go to a close-up of that shot. These are the two men you see sitting in the center, probably farmers from New Jersey or Pennsylvania, and they have on, they're wearing blankets literally as coats. And one has a flintlock musket with a ramrod attached, and the other is seriously wounded with his head bandaged. And now the stern of the boat. This is clearly a Native American, which can be seen by his Western, he's also in a Western hunting shirt, but he's distinguished both by his features, the beads that he's wearing, as well as the moccasins, which are on his feet. And then here you have Emanuel Leutze with his name inscribed on the painting on one of the blocks of ice. I had the opportunity a few years ago in December, to visit the site of Washington's crossing in Pennsylvania. And there's a reenactment that's carried out there every year around Christmas time. And in fact, about 2 out of every 3 attempts to get across the river fail, even if you don't have the kind of wild weather that you had back in 1776, which actually was the end of a little ice age. So the determination to succeed, so clearly depicted on the faces shown in Leutz's painting, despite the hardships and the storm, are key to victory then and in weathering our crises today. So we invite all of you to this year to join the celebration by studying, by investigating, by writing, by touring, and by sharing your newly discovered information of the history of the American Revolution with your fellow citizens. So I hope that this picture gives us hope that, as different as we are, possibly as flawed as we might be, that we are, in learning who we are, that we can once again in this semi-quincentennial year of the American Revolution, become the nation that we were intended to be, a beacon of hope and a temple of liberty for all mankind. Thank you.